Hi, welcome to George & Company. There is a story to be told. My guest today is Anna Mae Shirko and Marjorie J. Paddock. And they are from the U.S. Cadet Nurse Corps, which was formed in 1943 through 1948. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us.
Let's get started with 1943. I'll start with you, Anna. Take us back to 1943. How old were you, and how did you get going into this cadet nurse program?
Well, in 1943, I was a young teenager, and of course, very aware and concerned about the war, but still going to high school. And so I was preoccupied with studies and volunteering as a candy striper at a local hospital. So that was my first introduction into nursing. But it wasn't until I had to be 17 before I could become part of the Cadet Nurse Corps. And of course the high schools were being informed that this program existed and that there was a great urgent need for nurses. So I became interested, and I had actually no hope of getting into college or art school as I had wanted to, because my father believed the girls got married, didn't need to go to school. So because this program was introduced into the schools, I thought, that's what I'm going to do. So I told my parents that I was going to enlist in the Cadet Nurse Corps. And needless to say, nurses did not have the greatest reputation at the time. It was not considered good work or desirable work. And my father in particular was very upset that I was going to do this. But I was strong-willed, and I looked into applying, and that was at different hospitals in the area. So I went to the Hahnemann Hospital in Scranton, Pennsylvania, and I went through the series of exams and the physical, but I was only 16. And so they said, well, you know, you can't belong until you're 17. So I was 17 in May, and I was accepted, and in June I was in the Cadet Nurse Corps.
Wow. And what about you, Marjorie?
Actually, I was in college. I had a year of college. I graduated very young from high school. I was only 16. So my dad said, I don't want you to go out into the workforce. So I went to Fairleigh Dickinson. I was in the first year at Fairleigh Dickinson College. So I had a year there. And I heard about the Cadet Nurse Corps on the radio. My father was in the living room listening to it, and he said, you know, you've always talked about medicine also. This sounds like a very good program. So we investigated it further, and we found out that Bellevue Hospital, NYU, would be one of the hospitals fostering this program. So my mother and I went. My mother drove. My mother was years ahead of her time. We drove into New York City, and we did have an interview. And we came back, I think it was a week later, and we had 3 days of the written exam, 1 day of oral exam, and then we also had the physical, and I was accepted. So I came into Bellevue NYU Hospital, I believe it was in the June class. There were 4 classes a year at that time because, as we had talked about, nurses stateside, the hospitals were desperate. Some of them were ready to close because they had no staff. And So again, the Cadet Nurse Corps was only in very privileged hospitals. Only the best hospitals across the nation were permitted to have the United States Cadet Nurse Corps. It was a hard time. We were only in classes for 4 months, and before you know it, we were on the wards. And there was one cadet nurse in charge. The wards at Bellevue at that time were 40 patients. And these were wonderful people. They were the greatest patients in the world. They were very respectful, but they were from the Lower East Side.
Wow.
And so they had many, many problems. It was a difficult time to take care of these people because we had such long hours. If we worked a day shift, they would give us a call from the supervisor and they would say there was no one to relieve you, and we would have to work a full next shift. And that's why so many of the girls became ill, and many left, and we were not permitted to marry. So if a sailor or whoever, a boyfriend came home and they married, they were discharged.
Wow.
But it was a wonderful program. It was a
Wow.
wonderful program because it provided nurses to this country for many, many years.
Wow, this is interesting because statistically it lists that 188,000 registered for this program, but now you're saying that some got sick and some
Yes. Yes.
dropped out for various reasons.
And
or
some
couldn't-
failed.
And some failed the
Yes,
test.
absolutely.
So the magic number then is down to about 125,000.
Yes.
Those are the
Right.
ones that completed the
Absolutely.
program.
I think it's
125,000.
important also that in 1943, how this program got started was Congresswoman Frances P. Bolton,
Yes.
a Republican from Ohio, introduced a bill to provide grants to schools for training nurses, and that eventually became law in the same year. Do you believe how quick that happened?
Yes.
On July 1st, 1943, and that's how this all started. Now you finished the program. Where is your assignment?
Well, you completed 3 years, and that included learning and serving. You learned in the classroom, and you went on the units and performed. You did all services that the graduate nurses did prior to the cadet program. There might have been one registered nurse as a supervisor. And so it was a full 3 years, 12-hour plus days. And if you were fortunate enough to complete the program, the seniors were taken into the Army particularly, and some volunteered for the Navy and Naval Reserves. So the seniors were primarily going into